Okay, good morning, everybody. Thank you for coming. Morning to those person, those joining us on Zoom. Thank you for coming. We are just 2 days away, I believe, from Yom Kippur. So here we are, 30 Tshuva. We've gotten through Rosh Hashanah, Shabbat Tshuva. We're on our way. I'm reminded of a story. The story of Hashavais tells every year that it happened once. I think it was the Chofetz Chaim was traveling through a town, and there was a shtibel of Hasidim, and it was Erev Yom Kippur. It was Yom Kippur Katan. So, sorry, it was Erev Rosh Chodesh. And then Erev Rosh Chodesh, not Yom Kippur. So it was Yom Kippur Katan. Many have the minhag to daven Yom Kippur Katan on Erev Rosh Chodesh. And he said to them, are you going to daven Yom Kippur Katan after Mincha? And they said, no, we don't daven Yom Kippur Katan because our Rebbe doesn't daven Yom Kippur Katan. So he said to them, let me explain something to you. He said, and he tells them a story. And the story is that there's two Jews get on a train station at Krakow, and the one says to the other, where are you going? So I'm going to Warsaw. And he says, oh, so am I. They get on the train, and the train starts going, and at the very next stop, the one gets off. He says, why are you getting off? He says, I thought you were going out. He says, no, you have to understand. I'm a very poor person. I can't afford a ticket to go all the way. So what I do is I get together a few rubles, whatever it is. I buy a ticket to wherever I can go. I get on the train. I get off. I'll gather together a little bit more money. I'll get the next ticket. Eventually, I'll get there. Eventually, I'll get to the destination. I'll meet you there. So he says to them, he says, your Rebbe is a very wealthy man. He gets a ticket one Yom Kippur to the next. That's enough for him. He can go get to his destination. The rest of us, it's not so easy. We can't go. We need a few stops along the way to help us. We need Yom Kippur Katan. We aren't spiritually wealthy enough to buy the ticket all the way. So we have a number of stops to help us to get on the way to our destination. And we had the month of Elul. We blew the shofar. We started saying Slichot. We have Rosh Hashanah. We have a Sept Tshuva. We have Shabbat Tshuva. Erev Yom Kippur. Eventually we get to Yom Kippur, but we will, Bezrat Hashem, get to our destination. So we're almost there. I wanted to talk today about some of the halachot of Yom Kippur, and in general, we'll divide it up into some of the probably the most central mitzvah, ben adam lemakom, and the most central mitzvah, I suppose, ben adam lechavero, that we have on Yom Kippur. We also have Erev Yom Kippur and Yom Kippur itself. We also have, the Maharal talks about the fact, we're used to thinking of ben adam lechavero, ben adam lemakom, but there is also a category of ben adam le'atzmo, between man and oneself. Certainly on Yom Kippur, if ever there is a time for introspection, there is a time of thinking about ourselves, times of thinking, who am I and what am I doing and where am I going? That is the job of Yom Kippur as well. Rosh Hashanah, as we spoke about, is a time of looking forward. Time of looking forward to the future. Once we've looked forward to the future, once we've maybe thought about some goals and set some goals, and if we haven't yet, so we still have time to do that, but Yom Kippur is very much going back, getting back to basics, looking back, going through, making that accounting, action by action, deed by deed, word by word. What have I done? Who am I? Who have I become? And how can I hopefully try and change that? So it's certainly a day more than any other, where the words of the machzor and the words of the tefillah are not just there. We'll talk about it. Not just there to go through the motions, but there's a very personal and there's very deep work that has to be done, saying these words, understanding these words. And that's why if one does not understand the words of the vidui, one can say them in English, one can add words in, one maybe should add words in at this time. Whereas, people always ask me, should I add in personal presence? Should I add in certain things? So Rosh Hashanah, I'm always hesitant to add in words to the tefillah. But Yom Kippur, I think it's very, very, very important that one does that. So let's start off with an anecdote. Shlomo Zalman Auerbach would always lament the fact. He says, before Yom Kippur, they come and they ask me so many shaylas. Everybody asks me about fasting, and the pregnant and the nursing and the this and the sick people and how to eat and shiurim and can I eat or not eat and all so many questions. He says, if only you would come and ask me questions about Hilchot Tshuva. Everybody wants to know the halachot of how to fast, There's a mitzvah of tshuva as well. I remind you that the mitzvah of tshuva is not a mitzvah tasei shel zman grama. Nonetheless, the Rambam writes, we've quoted many times, that tshuva is accepted throughout the year, but 10 days between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, it is yafeh bayoter, it is even more accepted, and it's more important, and therefore that is, we spoke in Shabbos a little bit about the obligation if one does not do tshuva at this time, so that's certainly important, and one has to know what are the definitions and what are the categories, etc. How does one do tshuva? So let's start off with something. We all know that there's, as I mentioned, there's averot ben adam lemakom, and then averot ben adam lechavero. On Yom Kippur, we will stand already. We start before Yom Kippur. We start at Mincha. Of Erev Yom Kippur, we say Vidoy for the first time, right? Before we get to the Sudam of Sept, and before we go into the fast. There are those who write, there's a machloket in Halacha as to the Vidoy they want us to say before Yom Kippur, is the Vidoy before the Sudam of Sept or after the Sudam of Sept. So our custom is, and the Rambam writes, you have to say Vidoy before the Sudam of Sept in case, God forbid, one might choke and one might not make it after the Sudam of Sept. I remember a few years ago, not in this community, it's a terrible thing. It was Erev Yom Kippur, and there was a person who just he didn't make it. He had a heart attack or whatever it was, and the community came in on the night of Yom Kippur. It was a terrible way to enter. Unfortunately, these things do happen sometimes. But we say that before. But there's also an inyan of vidoy at the beginning of coming into Yom Kippur with the vidoy before it begins, and that is why there are different piyutim or different tefillot that are said. The Sfaradim have theirs, the Ashkenazim have theirs. We say tefillah zakah, and in the tefillah zakah, which is printed in the Machzor, is very, very long. It's very long, and most people don't get to the end. Many people don't get to the beginning. Depends what time you get to shul. But that is why you'll notice in some of the Machzorim it's actually printed out of order. And the reason why it's printed out of order, the Chafetz Chaim said, there is a paragraph, which we'll get to, a very, very important paragraph. And the Chafetz Chaim said, if you cannot say the whole Tefillah Zakah, don't worry, make sure you say this paragraph. Okay, now I've got you all in suspense, I've got you all your attention, we'll talk about it. But we'll see exactly what that paragraph is. To understand what that paragraph is and why it's so important and why we have to make sure that we say it. So we go to the Gemara, really the Mishnah in Masechet Yoma. The most of Masechet Yoma deals with Korbanot, deals with the Seder Avodah of the Kohen Gadol. There's a very, very moving video that's going around. You might have seen it, related to Seder Avodah. A few years ago, Yishai Riba brought out a song, a beautiful song about Seder Avodah. And this year, the Rabbanut Tzva'it, the chief army rabbinate, put out a video, and there are two frames. And in one frame, you see the person putting on his uniform, putting on his, his army uniform and his boots, etc. And in one frame, you see him putting on his kittel and going and singing the Seder Avodah, the Kohen Gadol, going on, putting on the clothes, taking off the clothes. Very, 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 very moving and poignant piece. But the Mishnah tells us. So as I say, most of Masechet Yoma deals with the Avodah of the Kohen Gadol, deals with Korbanot. The final perek deals in great detail with Tshuva, different aspects of Tshuva, and Yom Kippur itself. And we are taught the following. The Gemara says in Masechet Yoma, Daf Pei Amud Bet, Averot sheben adam lemakom, Yom Kippurim mechaper. For those Averot which are between man and God, Yom Kippur will give us atonement. Well, the word mechaper actually means to wipe away. Averot sheben adam lechavero, en Yom Kippurim mechaper, ad she'yotze et chavero. However, when it comes to mitzvot, when it comes to Averot ben adam lechavero, between man and man, Yom Kippur does not do the job for you. Yom Kippur is only helpful if you have appeased, if you have gained forgiveness from your friend. So, by the way, there's discussion when we say Averot sheben adam lemakom Yom Kippurim mechaper. Is that with tshuva or is that without tshuva? So there is an opinion that says even if a person has not done tshuva, talking now about ben adam lemakom, but even if a person has not done tshuva, there's an opinion that says itzumo shayom mechaper, that something happened on Yom Kippur that you get kapara for that, even if you haven't done anything. You stayed in your bed all day on Yom Kippur, you didn't think about it. Okay. We don't paskin that way. We paskin that Yom Kippurim mechaper with tshuva. However, even according to the opinion that we follow, it's that when you've done tshuva in and of itself is not enough. There is an extra added power of something that Yom Kippur comes in, and that finishes the job, so to speak. So the tshuva that we do throughout the year, on Yom Kippur, we can achieve something we could not achieve on any other day. But the issue is, and the frightening bit is, the avarot sheben adam lechavero. So say, if you have insulted somebody, you have angered somebody, you have whatever it is. Again, when you've done something wrong, often people get insulted or angry when you haven't done anything. So that's on them. But if you've genuinely, you've done something to somebody else, have gabayim here, I see people are laughing. You know how it is. That's something that can happen. But we've all done things to other people to offend them, to upset them, to hurt them, etc. We have to get their forgiveness. Now, continues the Gemara. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. Mikol chatotechem nifnei Hashem titaru. This is a pasuk we will say many times on Yom Kippur. Averot sheben adam lemakom Yom Kippurim mechaper. Averot sheben adam lachavero en Yom Kippurim mechaper ad she'yartzeh chavero. Okay, so he quotes the pasuk. Listen to the words of the pasuk say, Mikol chatoteichem, from all your sins, lifnei Hashem titaru, which are before Hashem you will be purified. Notice as well, until now we spoke about kapara. Now we're talking about tahara. What is the difference between kapara and tahara? Rav Soloveitchik has a whole piece on that in Ala Tshuva. But from the fact that the pasuk says lifnei Hashem, so we learn that avarot sheben adam le'makom Yom Kippurim mechaper. For sins between man and God, Yom Kippur takes care of, right? Avarot sheben adam lechavero en Yom Kippurim mechaper ad she'yartzeh chavero. Now I know what you're all thinking. Didn't we just say that? Right? There's a complete. What's the difference? The Tanna Kama said, "Averot sheben adam lemakom Yom Kippurim mechaper. Averot sheben adam lachavero en Yom Kippurim mechaper ad she'yartzeh chavero." And I'm reading it very quickly, but it's because דרש רבי אלעזר בן עזריה מכוח הדברים לפני השם תתארו. אבות שבן אדם למקום יום הכיפור מכבה, אבות שבן אדם לחברו אין יום הכיפור מכבה עד שירצה לחברו. It's the exact same language. What is Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah teaching me? What is Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah adding? He's not adding anything. He's saying the exact same thing that I already know that the Tanna Kama told me. Okay, he quotes a pasuk. So he could have said. So Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah says, we know it from the pasuk. Question number one. Then the Mishnah continues, Amar Rabbi Akiva, Ashreichem Yisrael, Lifnei mi atem mitarim, mi mitarer etchem avichem shebashamayim. Right, beautiful idea that Rabbi Akiva says. But the question is, why is it so superfluous? Why all this repetition? So there is a book called Ein Yaakov. Ein Yaakov is a collection of the Agadatot, the non-halachic sections of the Gemara. One of the commentaries on the Ein Yaakov is called the Rif. This is not the Rif Rabbi Alfasi, who was printed at the back of the Gemarot. This is a different Rabbi Yoshaya Pinto, who was a different Rav later on, and he wrote a commentary on the Ein Yaakov. But listen to what he says. And he says something frightening. He says, "Avarot sheben adam lachavro v'chulei v'kasha lan. Ma osif od Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah lidrosh yoter me'amur kodem." What does Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah added on what we've already said? If he's coming to just give me a proof from the pasuk, then he didn't have to repeat the whole language. Right, that's what he could have said. Etc. So he quotes, so that's the question. And then he says like this. This is what Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah is saying. Shaverot sheben adam lemakom, that those averot, those transgressions between man and God, Yom Kippurim mechaper, that Yom Kippur takes care. Ubizman sheyesh lo gam ken averot sheben adam lachavero. However, if you also have averot ben adam lachavero, things done between man and man, תלויה כפרת עוונותיו שבן אדם למקום עד שירצה לחברו מה שחטא עם חברו. He says, we thought that it means between me and God, I'm good. I've missed shul, I've come late for shachrit, I didn't say kriyat shema, I was lazy with my tefillin, whatever. I didn't say my brachot, coach, all that I'm good. This is not to say, this is not to endorse doing averot during the year. We should try not to do averot during the year. But all the averot during the year, you've done tshuva, you come before God, Yom Kippur. Okay. There's the Ben Adam Lachaveros piece, which is a little bit more difficult. That I haven't gone forgiveness from everybody. Okay, so for those, I'm in trouble. But you know what? I'm going to walk out of Yom Kippur. I'll be 50% clean. Says the Rif says that no. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah is telling you something completely different. He's telling you that if you still have averot sheben adam lachavero, until you've taken care of that, then God says, I'm not going to forgive what you owe me either. That's what he says. And therefore, when Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah comes along and adds in, he says, when will be when you have gone ad shiratzet chavero, when a person's taken care of his ben adam lachavero, then he can come and then he can step into Yom Kippur, and then that can take care of everything as well. Now, we don't paskin that way, thankfully. We'd be in a lot of trouble if we did. But it just goes to show you how serious this is, how severe this is. Ben Adam lachavero. It's not so peshut. It's not that a person can just come into Yom Kippur and say, God, it's just between me and you. We'll be fine. All those people out there. No. You have to, if you don't take care of the things, the way that you've wronged other people, then there's a question. Yeah, it's questionable how effective even your tshuva of Yom Kippur is as well. And that is why. That is why the minhag is that on Erev Yom Kippur, we go around asking everybody for forgiveness. Now, what does it mean asking for forgiveness? It means you genuinely ask for forgiveness. The way this should be done is that a person should think all the things that I've done in the year, and I should think of all the people that I've wronged and all the people that I've hurt and genuinely offended and genuinely caused pain and distress to, and I should go up to them one by one. And I should say, listen, you remember when we had a fight about such and such a thing, and remember when I said such and such a thing to you? I'm genuinely sorry. Yeah, and you have to mean it, and you has to be filled with remorse. That's the way you ask for mechila. Nowadays, people have all sorts of, you send the mass text, you send the mass email on Erev Yom Kippur, you meichel me. Or once I spoke to somebody and was like, today I forgive you. I'm sure you forgive me as well. No, that's not what it is. You have to actually ask and genuinely. Now, the problem is that sometimes, actually more often than not, either A, we can't remember, or B, the person doesn't know. And it's very, very embarrassing, to go. You're going to go up to a person who thinks that they're your best friend, and by the way, you've been really good to me throughout the year, and you've been my best friend, and you've helped me out, and you've done all these good things for me. Actually, I was, 90% of the time I was going and I was talking lashon hara about you behind your back. So, but I just, will you moichel? That's going to cause the person. So there's a discussion. It's generally presented as a machloket. It's probably not a machloket, but it's often presented as a machloket between the Chafetz Chaim and Rabbi Yishmael Salant as to what a person should do, whether a person is allowed to go and to cause pain to ask the person. What we generally say is that if in your telling the individual about what you had done, so it's caused them more pain, so you can't tell them. So how do you get the forgiveness? So then the next best thing you can do is you can ask forgiveness in a general sense. And you ask forgiveness in a general sense. And we assume that since it's Erev Yom Kippur, and since the person also wants to be forgiven for what they've done, and they'll forgive you for what you've done, so that's the next best thing. But the fact that I have sinned towards somebody else, the fact that I want kapara, does not give me license to go now and cause another sin. So one has to be very, very, very careful. So obviously one has to be exceedingly careful throughout the year, but also on Erev Yom Kippur, right? I'll say, people often think about asking mechila and asking forgiveness for those that are furthest away from them. Really where you have to do this, and where it maybe is actually easier, is I think in those closest. We think about family relationships, you think about parent and child relationships and spouses and siblings. Often, within the family, these are the people that we have the most interaction with throughout the year. These are the people, generally speaking, it's often the people that we love the most, that we've hurt the most. And those kind of people, very often, if it's genuine, and I remember hearing once from one of Rav Avadia's children, I think it was Rav Abraham Yosef, or one of the others, I don't remember who, but he said the kid, they remember, every Erev Yom Kippur, with tears in their eyes, Rav Avadia and his wife, they would go and they would ask forgiveness for one another. I can imagine, what did they do? What did they actually have to ask forgiveness for one from another? But nonetheless, and he said he remembered it made such an imprint and such an impact on the kids. Generally speaking, where there is a real and there's a sincere relationship, so you've caused hurt and you've caused pain, but you can go and you can, in a sincere way, go and ask for forgiveness, and that's something which is very, very important that one needs to do. Again, for those you can't, or for those it's impossible, so then we ask for the general forgiveness. There's the famous mashal, the story of the man who comes to the Rav and he says, Rav, I've spoken lashon hara. How do I get kapara? How do I get atonement for it? The rabbi says, okay, we're going to do show and tell. He says, go and bring me a pillow, right? A feather pillow. And he brings it, and he takes a knife, and he slips it open, and all the feathers go scattering in the wind. He says, really? That's all I have to do? He says, no. Now we begin. He says, now go get all the feathers and put them back in. He says, but it's impossible. They've all spread. I don't know. He says, well, that's what you have to do. You've spoken. You don't know how far it's gone. You don't know where it's spread to. How are you going to? So this is why it's brought in halacha. This actually came up in the Gemara shiur a few days ago, that somebody who has stolen, for example, somebody has stole from somebody and doesn't know who they stole from, or there's no way they can give it back. A thief talking about gazela, right? A thief has an obligation to go back and return the stolen object. Only if he can't return it, so then the poskim say you should give money to tzorchei rabim. You should contribute to the needs of the community. in the hope that the individual from whom you stole is going to benefit, and then in some way you've paid them back. So they say the same thing about lashon hara, and it's the same thing about spiritual harm that you've caused. But all of that is b'di'evet, right? Lekatchila, number one, really the only way out of this is not to ever speak lashon hara, not to ever wrong anybody else, which is not something that's easily going to happen. Number two is find the people and ask specifically forgiveness from those whom we have wronged. And number three, barring that, is going to those people and ask them for general forgiveness. And sometimes even that you can't do. And sometimes you don't know where they are. Sometimes you can't reach them, or sometimes. So then we get back to Tfilah Zakah. And now we understand why this Tfilah is written out of order in the Machzor, because the Chafetz Chaim said that Averot sheben Adam lachavero, we know, and we say it in the Tfilah, we say it explicitly in this paragraph. We know that Yom Kippur will not atone for those ad shiratzeh chavero, until you have gone and asked forgiveness. And again, there are situations whereby it's impossible, where I can't find the person, or I can't. So we have a paragraph then. What we say is, I forgive anybody who has wronged me. Okay? And I hope and I pray that in the merit of that, they'll also be saying this tefillah. And that they will also, and that they will also forgive me for whatever I've done to them. That is the next best thing that we can do, and we hope that will work, and we hope that Kadosh Baruch Hu will forgive us and atone for us in that way. Okay, so that's more or less regarding Ben Adam Lachavero, regarding asking for forgiveness, etc. Okay, the Shulchan Aruch in Siman Tafresh Vav talks about it. By the way, one is not required to wait. There does seem to be an inyan that it's actually something to do with its Dinay Erev Yom Kippur. It's not just Dinay Ben Adam L'Chavero. There is something specific and something unique about the day of Erev Yom Kippur that is the time to go and ask for forgiveness. Maybe it's because everybody's heart's open at that time. Everybody's willing to forgive. It says that a person should not be cruel, and a person should not refuse to forgive somebody who asks. If you go and you ask them on Yom Kippur Katan, one of the other stations along the way, they might say no. And Erev Yom Kippur, they might say yes. But again, this is also not a time-bound mitzvah. One is not required to wait until Yom Kippur to ask somebody for forgiveness. You can ask them for forgiveness anytime that you've wronged them. You should do. Maybe it's better because then you remember. Okay. You can ask them again on your Erev Yom Kippur, again, if it's not going to offend them. What if a person says no? What if you go and you ask somebody for forgiveness and the person says no? So everybody knows. I remember in school, everybody knows. You have to ask 3 times. Do you forgive me? No. Do you forgive me? No. Do you forgive me? No. Okay, it's on you. That's not how it works. Right? That is not considered. It has to be 3 different times. It's actually machloket, whether it's 3 times or after the first time it's 3 times. So maybe it's 3 times, maybe it's 4 times, but it's on 3 separate occasions. It may be that after the first time, you even have to do it in the presence of 3 people, in the presence of 10 people. Okay, it's a serious thing. Sometimes, and it has to be genuine, it is brought. A person should not be cruel, and a person should not be unforgiving. Sometimes it's not easy, sometimes it's not simple. I remember once I had a case where a certain person had... There'd been a history. I'm not going to get into the details, and I'm not going to. You don't know the people, but nonetheless, I won't give any identifying details away. But a certain individual went on Erev Yom Kippur and went up to another person and said, can we just, I'm sorry. Can we just move past it? Just forget about it. Bygones be bygones. And the person said no. And then, one of the people came up to me and said, I don't understand. I've asked the person for forgiveness. And they said, no. So it's not a magic formula. It's a real thing, and it's sincere. And the person had caused serious offense and caused serious hurt. And it's not so simple as, there's a magic formula. And that person he couldn't find it within his heart to forgive this individual. Later on, they did. But that's another reason why maybe if you know that you have a very heavy case like that, sometimes you have a severe case where there's a real machloket between people. You're going to wait till Erev Yom Kippur. The guy's going to say no. So you should start earlier. You should start, and then you can, again, if they say no, you can go after Yom Kippur and you can ask them for forgiveness again. But these cases do happen. Again, forgiveness, when we say it from the perspective of me, if I'm the person who was wronged and I forgive the person, it doesn't mean they have to be my best friend. It doesn't mean I have to, but it means not hold it against them in my heart. Sometimes people find it difficult to forgive. It's useful to separate those two different elements. Okay. That is, we could talk a lot more about this, but we'll leave it there for now regarding the Ben Adam L'Chavero. Let's talk very briefly about the Ben Adam L'Makom piece as well. We know that there are 5 inuyim, 5 afflictions on Yom Kippur. There was the prohibitions, of course, for the entire period from the night until the day, unlike many of the minor fasts that we have. This is the only fast, of course, that's from the Torah, right? It's in Isuda Raita, so there is no eating, there is no drinking, there is no washing for pleasure, there is no anointing for pleasure, there is no wearing of shoes, which generally speaking nowadays we assume to be leather shoes, and no marital relations. Those are all forbidden throughout the day of Yom Kippur. Question that often, very, very often comes up: somebody who is ill or who is unwell, or pregnant women or nursing women, etc., are they allowed to eat and are they allowed to break their fast? So there's a famous story that is told of Rav Yisrael Salant, where there was for a number of years there were cholera epidemics that were raging throughout Europe, and cholera, you get dehydrated. It's very, very dangerous, and people had to eat. So they say that Rabbi Yisrael Salant got up. There are different girsot of the story. There is one version of the story that says that he got up on the bima on Yom Kippur and he made kiddush and he ate and everybody had to eat. There's another girsot that says he told everybody go home and eat. I once asked Rabbi Wein, I said, I don't know which version of the story is true. Rabbi Wein said to me, none of them. So it's anyway, whatever, exactly what. Yeah. So exactly what transpired there, we don't know, but there are stories of Rabbi Salant, Rabbi Kiva Eger, etc. The bottom line is that Pikuach Nefesh, right? Pikuach Nefesh is Doche Yom Kippurim. So unlike the other fasts, where we say the minor fast, and even Tisha B'Av, where we say that somebody who is unwell to a certain extent would be able to break their fast, and Yom Kippur is only somebody who's entered the category of Echoleh sheyesh po sakana. Only where it is, we are dealing with Pikuach Nefesh, we're dealing with Sakana Nefashot. Again, that may mean, and I can't go into all the cases now, but it may mean that if a person is right now I wouldn't say healthy, but a person is okay, they're not in a dangerous situation. But if they don't eat, it will then get worse and it will deteriorate towards a life-threatening situation. Then the person should eat or should drink. Again, all of these, there are many broadcasts that are taking place now already for weeks with doctors and with rabbis and asking all the questions. And I always tell people, weeks before, days before, don't wait until there's somebody who consulted with me, somebody who's pregnant. 2 weeks ago, she called me up and said, what do I do on Yom Kippur? Okay, a month before Yom Kippur, you know that you're pregnant, so you know it's going to be a question. Don't wait until the morning, or don't wait until, it happened to me once, not here, in a different community. After Mariv of Kol Nidre, somebody came up to me and said, my wife's pregnant, what should she do on Yom Kippur? I said, now you come and ask, you didn't know, they knew a month before. So again, generally speaking, people know if they have conditions, they have pre-existing conditions. Sometimes something happens the day before the fast, okay. But you have pre-existing conditions, you know that there's a question should be asked in advance. This happens in every single area of halakha, by the way, and I always tell people, ask questions in advance. Sometimes things come up and you need an answer on the spot, that's fine. But I always tell people, come and ask in advance, and people never listen. But anyway, that's, I'll say it again, and again, people won't listen. But that's...
Right, I was saying on the radio, and I guess it's the Rosh Hashanah or Site was basically saying that they eat sock and azal, like everybody should eat. And then if there's an exception to something, they should speak to, like if they're the aura, they're this, whatever, then they should speak to the Rav Hidat to get okay, you can fast. And then
right.
People on the radio were saying, wow, when we were in the army 30 years ago or something, that would never been something that somebody had said. It was like, the whole thing was like that. So it's all over the places.
Yeah, manyan. Yeah. So I guess you have these exceptional circumstances. We had during Corona, again, there were all questions and nobody knew exactly what to do. But like you say, chayalim, certainly a chayal, a soldier who is on active duty, should not be fasting. There's no question about that. And it's not a case of, again, the scenario is you're going to wait. If you're on konanut or whatever, and you're going to wait until, and then you're going to start, then it's going to be too late. You're going to start drinking and then you're going to be dehydrated. So obviously that is a different scenario. But yeah, so somebody should know beforehand. Somebody who is required to eat, again, there's often a psychological element to this. People are very often very, very, very upset or very bothered about the fact that, if they have to break their fast. And the answer to that always is that just as there is a mitzvah to fast for those who are able to, there is a mitzvah to eat for those who are unable to. One who is, you have to clarify that one fits into this category. But if one fits into this category, every year I get questions. People call and say, so the doctor said that I need to drink, but I think that I can fast. I said, no, I don't give you permission to try. The doctor said you need to drink. You need to drink. That's that's your mitzvah. It's v'chai b'hem, and that's what a person should do. And there are, unfortunately, some very tragic stories of people who were not allowed to fast on Yom Kippur, and they decided to fast on Yom Kippur, and they did not survive. These questions come up. So if one is in a situation of pikuach nefesh, or one is going to enter into a situation of pikuach nefesh by fasting, then in such a case, one should not fast. How do we know? So you have to speak to the doctor, and you have to speak to the rabbi. And again, somebody came and spoke to me last week, and they were very, very upset. They said, rabbis are not doctors, and rabbis can't give prescriptions, and rabbis can't give medical decisions. And I said, I agree with you 100%. And that's why anytime anybody comes and asks me a question about Yom Kippur, the first thing I say to them is, what does your doctor say? This case that I was telling you about, certain praying, generally speaking, if there are no complications and there is no reason for it, we assume that pregnant women can fast, at least can start fasting. But I said, what does your doctor say? Does your doctor give you permission to fast? She said, yes. I said, okay, and you can fast. And if such and such happens, then this is what you should do. There is a concept of shiurim, of drinking to shiurim. I'll just mention this quickly, which, and now again, drinking in shiurim is still considered breaking the fast. A healthy person cannot drink anything on Yom Kippur and cannot eat anything on Yom Kippur. But somebody who is sick, because we say hakala kal tchila, we generally assume if one is the amount of a shiur, which is less than the amount for which one would be chayav karet, it's still, if one was healthy, right? It's still a prohibition, but we say we go by the lighter prohibition first. And if you are somebody needs to stay hydrated, and drinking in shiurim, the amount, if you're drinking throughout the day, the amount of shiurim, you can keep hydrated relatively easily, and therefore, very often, somebody who needs to drink, we said we would allow it in what's called shiurim. If that's not enough and the situation medically warrants it, so then one can drink beyond that as well. What is a shiur? Yeah.
If we're already saying that shiurim are considered breaking fast, would you have to make kiddush first?
So this is a question that comes up in terms of, generally speaking, we say that no, we don't make kiddush on Yom Kippur. Regarding, but even if you're eating more than that, we don't say kiddush. In terms of brachot, one would say a bracha rishona before drinking, but if you're drinking in shiurim, there would be no bracha achrona. How does one know what a shiur is? This is something I tell people as well. Anybody who's listening who thinks that they may have to break their fast on Yom Kippur, even if they're not sure, so that you should measure the shiurim beforehand. The shiur, when it comes to eating, again, it's less common, but there are cases where people need to eat on Yom Kippur. Generally for food, we assume it's the size of a matchbox, not the big matchboxes, the small matchboxes, the amount of food that would fit in there, that we assume is for eating. That is an objective measurement. For drinking, it is a subjective measurement, and it changes from person to person, which is why you need to measure it out before, because a shiur for me and a shiur for you would be different. The shiur is what's called a melol ugmav, which is a cheekful. How do we measure a melon ugmav, one of the cheekful, for one who needs to break their fast? So we say, take water, take a big gulp of both cheekfuls, put it in your mouth, and then you would spit that out into a cup, so that you have 2 melon ugmavs, right? So you basically would then halve that amount. You would take a permanent marker, draw around the perimeter of the cup, and just underneath that is the amount which one is allowed to drink every 9 minutes. If necessary, we go down to 7 minutes or down to 4 minutes, because there are different opinions as to how far apart shiurim are. One more word I'll say, and this is far more common as well, even one who's not breaking their fast, sometimes question comes up regarding medicines, taking tablets. Now, taking a tablet is not considered eating. Swallowing a bitter pill, that is not considered eating in that sense, and therefore, one who needs to take medicine, swallowing the pill is not considered breaking one's fast. Somebody who is in chronic medicine or regular medicine for blood pressure, blood thinners, or heart disease, all sorts of things, there is no question one should continue taking that medicine. Sometimes you have medicines, if you take once a day, you can get away with taking it before the fast, taking after the fast, etc. But one should, if one wants to play around or change the general procedure of what they do with their pills, you should speak to your doctor beforehand and get the authorization from him first. If the doctor says, sometimes you have medicine you take twice a day or 3 times a day, you can't go without it, so then you should not go without it, then you should take it. In terms of taking the pill itself, that is no problem. That's fine. The question becomes, what about drinking? If somebody cannot take the pill by itself, they need to drink together with it. So drinking, even for the sake of taking a pill, that is considered breaking one's fast. And therefore, we say as follows. If it's a case of somebody who's breaking their fast anyway because they're allowed to drink with the shiur, so then take the pill when you have the shiur. If you are fasting, you're not, but you can't take the pill, you can't swallow it without a little bit of liquid. What one should do then is prepare a liquid beforehand that is very, very bitter. Because very bitter food that you would not drink ordinarily, that also is not considered drinking. Again, for a healthy person, we'd not allow it. Still, problem midrabanan. But if that's the only way one can swallow the tablet, that is what one should do. One can take a few bags of chamomile tea and make a very, very bitter mixture before Yom Kippur. It doesn't have to be hot; it can be cold, and then you can drink that, a little bit of that with the pills, and that way one can get around that. Okay. So we'll stop there. That's just some of the halachot to give you a little bit of an overview. Again, if anybody has any questions, please, please, please don't wait until 5 minutes before the fast, or worse than that, 5 minutes after the fast. Please ask the questions beforehand. We still have some time, but we should all be inscribed. We've been inscribed. We should all be sealed in the Sefer of Tzadikim Gemurim, and should be a Gemar Chativa Tova for everybody, all of us and all of our Mishra.